In the onset of World War I, Germany was the first country to employ submarines in war as a substitute for other sea vessels and to devastating effect. Even with only 38 U-boats under Germany's command, they achieved notable success against British warships, though held off from adopting unrestricted U-boat warfare against merchant ships because of the reaction of neutral powers like the United States. Germany first announced the adoption of unrestricted U-boat warfare in 1915, but after the torpedoing of the British-owned ocean liner Louisiana on May 7, 1915, which killed 1,198 of the 1,959 passengers, with 128 of them being Americans, Germany retracted this statement and returned to restricted U-boat warfare. In February 1917, however, the decision to reinstate unrestricted warfare was made and was largely responsible to the entry of the United States into the war, with the U-boat campaign becoming a race between the German sinking of merchant ships and the building of new ships to replace them. With 430 Allied and neutral ships totaling 852,000 tons being sunk by the end of April 1917, it seemed that Germany's gamble to reinstate unrestricted warfare would pay off. The introduction of convoys, however, as well as the arrival of numerous U.S. destroyers and the vast output of American shipyards, turned the tables on the Germans, overpowering the U-boats in sheer number, leading to Germany slowly losing naval superiority and being unable to stop the U.S. from resupplying Britain with men and resources that were desperately needed in a war of attrition. By the end of the war, Germany had built 334 U-boats and had another 226 in construction. The peak U-boat strength of 140 was reached in October 1917, but no more than 60 were ever at sea at any one given time. After the loss of World War I by Germany and the Central Powers of Europe, the armistice terms of 1918 required Germany to surrender all its U-boats, and the Treaty of Versailles forbid the further manufacture of any U-boats by Germany. However, in 1935, Adolf Hitler rebuked the treaty and forcefully negotiated the right to restart the manufacture of U-boats in Germany. Britain was ill prepared for a resumption of unrestricted submarine warfare, and during the early months of World War II, the U-boats, numbering at the time only 57, again achieved great success in sinking and destroying Britain's navy and domination over the English Channel. Sir Winston S. Churchill recorded in his first Admiralty Minute Talk after taking office in September of 1939 that he was concerned with the strength of the enemy U-boat fleet. Quote, "There were now, in 1939, two dangers to be considered. The first, the old one of submarine incursion, the second, the new one of the air." End quote. The bitter lesson of World War I had not been forgotten, and plans had been prepared to institute convoy should war break out with Germany. These plans also revealed that the Coastal Command of the Royal Air Force, RAF, had an inadequate number of aircraft to meet all the demands, and that there was also an insufficient number of available surface ships for escort duty. U-boats generally operated singly before March of 1941, by which time many merchant ships were sailing in convoy with trained escort ships and aircraft, providing an effective anti-U-boat weapon. This was known as the first phase, and during the second phase, the Germans, having occupied air and U-boat bases in Norway and western France, were able to reach much further out into the Atlantic. At this time, Germany's U-boats also started operating in groups, named wolf packs by the British, where one U-boat would shadow a convoy and summon others by radio, triggering a group attack generally on the surface at night. Like in April of 1917 in the First World War, the Germans nearly succeeded in cutting Britain's Atlantic lifeline in March of 1943, but by May, escort carriers and long-range reconnaissance bombers became available, and, after losing 41 of their number during that month, the U-boats temporarily withdrew from the Atlantic, after which the U-boats were fitted with a snorkel, which permitted extended underwater travel and reduced the effectiveness of radar and returned to the waters around the British Isles, but ultimately did little good in the final war effort before Germany finally capitulated to the Allies on the 7th of May, 1945. During World War II, Germany built a total of 1,162 U-boats, 785 of which were destroyed, with the remaining number surrendering to the Allies. As stated by Winston Churchill, quote, "The Battle of the Atlantic was the dominating factor all throughout the war. Never for one moment could we forget that everything happening elsewhere, on land, at sea, or in the air, depended ultimately on its outcome." End quote.